Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Thursday night book club. And I hope that you can hear me. We're finishing up, or we're doing book 4 of the Stonemont series this evening. And so let me get into here real quick. This is a fantastic book. Not as much action as the others, but an awful lot to think about. Just some great stuff for you to ponder and to take into consideration as you're getting ready to develop your own prepping community or affiliation with others. So let's kind of start off. Hi, LG, and I would like to start off with some of hi GGG forms, and LG is there too. Okay. I would like to start off with some basic quotes that I just found really impressive in the overall genre of the book. So let's start off basically with the whole concept of what is Volume 4 really talking about. Well, we're talking about solidifying Stonemont and its outlying villages as an independent city-state. We're talking about there's a good conversation there between Jim Wyatt and Bill, the attorney, the judge, and about what they're going to do, how they're going to define citizenship, creating laws for the community, and determining what kind of a form of government we're going to have. And it's just a really good discussion between the two of them. And I think it's very appropriate. Later on, we'll get into another discussion about it. And one of the things we've seen and one of the things we've gotten away with our own government is, system of checks and balances. And Montesquieu, when he visited the U.S. shortly after the Revolution, and he wrote about his experience, the American experiment, and his admiration for how well it was conceived. And so we had the House of Representatives, we had the Senate, but those two chambers forming the legislative branch. And of course, you had the executive and judicial. But within that legislative branch, you had the citizens being represented by the House of Representatives, and that was based on population. And then each state had 2 senators, and that was considered the upper house. The senators originally were to represent the interests of the state. And so they were appointed by state legislatures. And then in 1913, we came out with the 17th Amendment, and we changed it from where the senators represent the state to where the senators are just another form of the House of Representatives. So that is why we've kind of lost the Federalist Republic type of government that we were intended to have, is because the states are out of the picture. They no longer have a say in the running of the government, which they should. And that's kind of reinforced by the 10th Amendment, that says that those powers that are not exclusively granted to the legislature in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution are basically reserved for the people in the 9th Amendment and the states in the 10th Amendment. And so we've kind of gotten away from that. Hi, Susan. And so that's, they're talking about forming that how do you get that local government and how do you defend against the larger encompassing overarching state and federal government. Hi, Lori, welcome. And so that's another one of the themes that's going throughout the book. We're also talking about expanding zones of influence. If you'll remember, I can't remember if it was book 2 or book 3, but Aaron and Alex, the Cooldale brothers. They are the super scouts, if you will, and they went down and got Declan and Celia from Lubbock and brought up the Texas Rangers to Stonemont for the wedding of Naomi to Christian. And so we have kind of a replication of that, where now Mike, Christian's buddy, remember the two of them met in book 1, when Mike was a security guard. No, he was an EMT, and Christian was a security guard, I believe, at the hospital. And the two of them met together and they came across. Well, during that same book 1, the first thing they encounter is Bill Garner, his wife, what's his wife's name? I forget his wife's name. The daughter, Tracy. They save them, and that's where we start seeing how brutal that this is going to become, in a post-SHTF environment. So now Mike is marrying that very same Tracy from that first encounter in book 1. Her parents are already there, so another part of the theme is expanding that zone of influence and going out and creating communications routes. They've already done it to the Southwest, from eastern Kansas down to the Texas Panhandle. Now they're going further east. Hi, Texas Redleg. Glad to see you. Hey, I had an invitation from the roaming prepper, and he wanted to know if it would be okay if I appeared on an interview with you. And I said, one of my favorite people, come on, you got to be kidding me. I would absolutely love to be on at the same time as Texas Redleg. So evidently he's going to get back and get the two of us together, and we're going to do an interview on the three of us about what's going on in Europe, I guess. I'm not sure. But anyhow, just thank you very much. I would love to be on there with you. Love to see you again. Hi, Lori. And so that's kind of the overarching what we're going to be doing here. Now, there are all kinds of threats that are emerging. We've got the threat of the new Kansas being developed in Topeka. We've got the threat of the gangs that are going around inside the area. I consider those kind of the local threats. We have the Muslims doing their thing up in Minnesota, and then trying to expand their empire down to the south. We've got the Mexican cartels, what I call the banditos, coming up from the south, and then of course, what's his name? The Texas Ranger, Naomi's dad. He's getting his guys ready to fight that off, and they're coming up to get Celia and then take her back down to Texas so they can find that. That's one of those fantastic quotes. Okay, now that we've talked about that, I want to get into a couple of these really great things that are in this book. I've got 3 of them tabbed. So the first one is a quote where they're talking about getting involved, and how to make people afraid to do bad things. And so on page 66, Jim is talking to Christian, and he says, it's always best to live in peace if you can, if others will allow you to. But when someone poses a threat to the safety and welfare of your family, it's important to act quickly, decisively, and in a way that will make them not want to take the chance of retaliation. So, and this is one of those things I think we're going to have to be very honest with ourselves about when it comes to an SHTF environment. Is there are going to be bad people out there, and how you meet the threat of those bad people. If you present yourself as being weak and you're afraid to take action, they will take advantage of you. So you've got to be decisive, quick, and take actions that no one would ever want to retaliate against. They would be afraid of that. So I think that's one of those key things we need to pay attention to and keep that kind of wrapped up inside your head. The next one I thought was really good was he quotes Psalm 144. A lot of people think that well, number one, it's a poor translation. The fifth amendment, the fifth commandment is translated kind of wrong in the King James version, and I think a lot of people get hung up on that. And I spent 21 years as a translator. I know how easy it is to make a common translation error. Probably the best way to translate the fifth commandment is "Thou shalt not murder," rather than "Thou shalt not kill." If you go back into the time period after Moses comes down with the 2 tablets and the fifth commandment saying, "Thou shalt not murder," right after that, they put into place over the course of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they put into place 365 death penalty laws. And so it would be impossible to have a death penalty for breaking the law if you couldn't kill. So it's not "thou shalt not kill," it's "thou shalt not murder." So let's go into Psalm 144, and it says, "Blessed be the Lord, my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight." So we have to, understand that, we're going to be asked to do things that a lot of people may find uncomely. And I would recommend that you read, I don't know, I'm not sure. Is First and Second Maccabees in the Protestant Bible? That's the Maccabean revolt. So you have the 4 great occupations of Israel. First the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, then you had the Persians, and King Ahasuerus married Esther, and Esther got the Jews out of the Persian bondage and back to build the second temple, and that's during the time of Nehemiah as well. And so when all of this is happening, that's when the second freedom from slavery. The first was Moses and Egypt. The second one is Esther and the prophet Nehemiah being freed from the Persian 70 years of bondage. And that's the Feast of Purim that is celebrated as a result of that. So kind of interesting stuff that goes back there, and talking about the exact same thing, and how they had to take vengeance. And so, they said King Ahasuerus of Persia decreed that the Jews could defend themselves against anybody who tried to kill them, and could take care of all of their possessions. But when they were attacked by some of the people who attacked the Jews never took their possessions. They never plundered. They only killed in self-defense and never plundered. And I thought that was kind of interesting as well. On page 149, there's another fantastic. I'm sorry, 119. No, it is 148, 149. Here we go. Yeah, I'm down to this one. So on page 148, they're talking about some of the things that have been established in the community in Stonemont, and how well they're doing, and some of the things that are going to be needed afterwards. And so Bill is talking here, and he says, as far as the businesses that have been established in Stonemont, we have the inn, so basically a hotel, if you will, along with a small restaurant. We have a livery stable, a farrier, Sean's Motor Company, he's building his little go-karts, Valerie's tailor shop, a hairstylist or barber, a general store, a grocery store, a doctor's office, an aid station, a dentist's office, a bakery, ready-made clothing, shoe store, and a general fix-it repair type shop. But the citizens want a pizzeria and another restaurant, one that has hamburgers and stuff like that. Then they're also talking about the next natural expansion is going to be a butcher shop. And then they also want to have some sort of a theater where they can have plays. And they find out that, remember, now Stonemont has developed hydroelectric power with the paddle wheel. And Bill Garner's wife, I keep forgetting her name, she's an engineer, and so she built that. And so they have electricity. So they traded some cattle for an old projector at a theater, and they're bringing in that projector, and they're going around looking for films so that they can show the films in this new theater, and then have plays and stuff like that, and add a little bit of culture to their society. So I think those are admirable things as well. Lori, let me tell you, there's so many things, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, because we're going to talk about Cassius. And Cassius Street, and he is the minister, and we can talk about some of the things that I thought of when we were talking about him. So, yeah, it's always great to have an engineer because that is definitely a weakness of mine. When I was at NSA in Fort Meade, my next door neighbor was a helicopter mechanic, and I had a '69 Malibu 307, and he said, "Lee, you need a tune-up." And I said, "Okay, I'll take it in." He says, No. Why don't you do it yourself?" And so he was going to teach me how to do a tune-up on my car. And we started the engine. I left out one screw, and the engine caught on fire because it rebuilt the carburetor wrong. And so we had to put out the fire. And then he redid rebuilt my carburetor for me. And one of the things I realized was I'm going to stick with code breaking and translating and leave the fixing stuff of engines and stuff to people who do that. That's not my strength. I focus on other things. I'm going to have to learn that, though, here in the near future as we progress. Now, the next thing that happens here is we've got all the sheriffs from the outlying areas. And then, I spent 3 years at Fort Riley, which is Junction City, Manhattan, which is the far western end of where all these activities are taking place. As a matter of fact, that's where the bad general comes from in this book. And so, they're talking about how do they defend themselves against this new Kansas. They're trying to rebuild the Kansas government. They've got all these politicos who haven't ever done anything decent in their lives, and who just want power, And as a matter of fact, later on in the book, you got this party, and Reagan and Brin are attending the party as undercover agents. And they say they've never seen so many fat, lazy people before in their life, except when they're at political rallies. And so I think that kind of gives a better understanding of where we are with this. But now they're entering into these defense pacts with these smaller entities. Now by this time, Stonemont has their scouts, about 200 or 300 of them. Most of the other sheriff's departments in smaller communities can muster up maybe 18 to 20 people in their defense contracts. And so, that kind of reminded me of the situation we're in with NATO. If you'll remember, we've always been the strong force in NATO. We've contributed up to 90% of the monetary funding for NATO, the forces and everything else, the largest GDP percentage of GDP to it. Now, for you younger people, I'm sure you don't remember this, but in the 1960s, as a result of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States withdrew 2 divisions from West Germany. We had 2 corps of 3 divisions in 5th Corps and 3 divisions in 7th Corps. We withdrew 2 of them, brought them back to the States. Now, we also told the Germans that we would be able to redeploy one of those divisions back to West Germany on 24-hour notice. We'd have the whole division there within 72 hours. And so we built these Pomkus sites in Mannheim, where we had an entire division's worth of equipment. All we had to do was fly in the soldiers. They'd go pick up the equipment and deploy to defend Germany. But that's where we also said we were going to come out with limited nuclear deterrence, that we would not, if Warsaw Pact attacked NATO, we would not endanger our country by throwing nukes at the Soviet Union. That really ticked France off. So France left NATO, and they were out of NATO for, 30, almost 40 years. And they finally just rejoined NATO recently. But because of our lack of desire to defend Europe with our strategic nuclear weapons, because we feared a retaliation by Soviet Union against us, France got upset and left. GGG Farms, I hope we make it through Christmas. That's my response there. I think that this is escalating even at paces that people didn't imagine before. I just saw before I came on, before I did this live, Germany is in a blackout right now, that they have no electric power whatsoever. So, things are getting kind of desperate. They aren't going to have any uh, heating when it comes to this winter. Poland is now, picking up on demanding repatriation of, a couple $1 trillion worth of damages incurred by the Polish people from the Germans during World War II. And, the world is falling apart. Absolutely. The world is falling apart. Um, and I'm not even sure that the alliances we have will stand. And then of course, we got North Korea flexing its muscles against South Korea and uh, intermediate range ballistic missiles over Japan. There have been 6 of those recently. We've got the Chinese flying a dozen aircraft and incurring, or what do you call it? Breaking the air zone of Taiwan. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and I try to avoid all that stuff. I just want to give you good prepping advice, and you can prep for whatever it is you want to do. But I can say I'm putting all my money into prepping. So that's how I will tell you how I believe things are going to go. Okay. Now then, Moody's dad is Moody's a minor character in the book, but I think that Steve put this in here strategically as something. And if we take a look at Forsyth's book, 1 Second After, and his trilogy, the whole thing about medication, both antibiotics as well as insulin. As a matter of fact, that book is what forced me to get whole house solar here, to have an extra 5 kW gas generator, to have an extra emergency power, my Jackery 1200. I've also got a Pilot solar powered refrigerator freezer. And I got all that simply because of my fear of not having a way to keep Helen's insulin cool. And if we have advanced warning, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to Walmart, to their pharmacy. And my number one priority is to get as much generic insulin as I can, because that scared me from Forsyth's book. And so, what I have to say here is, remember that her dad basically was chopping wood. The axe, obviously, he hit a knot or something. The axe ricocheted off the wood, cut his leg. And when you're using an axe and cutting wood, though you're using a lot of force, and that probably went down into the bone. A vet tried to do everything he could to try to save the leg, and he developed an infection that turned out to be fatal. So if I can encourage you one thing right now, and you don't have to do it through me, I get a $10 commission if you do it through me, and I'll be happy once you show me that you bought it. I'll refund your money to you. I'm not doing it for the money. Get antibiotics now. Go to Walmart, go to HEB, go wherever you can. Get as much topical antibiotic as you can for first aid. I believe that it is that critical. When you take a look at people are doing all these things for trauma, first aid kits, gunshot wounds and everything else. My experience, when I look back at, camp with the Boy Scouts and field outings with the military, they weren't gunshot wounds. They weren't all that stuff. Number one was burns. Make sure you have plenty of burn ointment. Number two was broken bones. Nobody talks about getting splints. I'd get a SAM splint. That's fantastic. You want something for broken bones. You want something for burns. You want something for wound treatment. Please don't get a suture kit. Please don't get a staple kit. Get yourself some Steri-strips. And the reason I say that is because every time you put a suture or a staple in, you're adding 2 more puncture wounds to that wound. You're tripling the chances of infection, and that's what we want to guard against. Get some sterile saline washes. They have them in the first aid area at Walmart. They have them in the first aid area at your local grocery store. I pick up a can of pressurized sterile saline every time, or at least once a month. I probably have 24, 36 bottles of them now. But I'm going to say that's critically important for your first aid kit. Oh, there was something else I wanted to tell you. Um, um, I watched a fantastic live last night on Van City Prepping. And she mentioned something I think is super, super critical. Well, she didn't, but one of the guests that was talking about this was all about, she had on 5 different EMTs and combat medics and everything else. And they said, if you're going to have different first aid kits, if you're going to have a first aid kit for your car, one for your house, one for your backpack, make sure you have the exact same first aid kit so that you know exactly where every component is. And it's always exactly the same. I knew we had standard IFAKs in the Army. They wanted us to wear the bandage on the upper left-hand part of your LBE. Everything was supposed to be packed the exact same way. Everything was supposed to be put in the same place. And now it makes sense to me. They didn't explain it why then, but whether it's my first aid kit, whether it's my buddy's first aid kit, or whether it's somebody else's first aid kit, we know exactly what's in it, where it is. We know where it's going to be on the body, so we can access it and take care and give the first aid. So, I thought that was very good advice last night on her live stream. Uh, Non-injectable stable insulin of options. We'll try. She's a brittle type 1, so she's on a pump, and we probably have to do blood sugar about every 2 hours, and then of course yes, either HEB or Walmart if you're in Texas for topical antibiotics. I did a book review. I just put it out at 6:00 this morning on. I've already put it back in the library on Cold Times, Dr. Anita Bailey's book, and she is a physician's attendant. She has a PhD in nursing, and she's a physician's assistant. She has a wonderful chapter in there on how to diagnose, how to prescribe, as far as what is the dosage you have to take, what is the regimen for how many days, what kind of antibiotic to use, and what the acceptable alternative is regarding what Susan's talking about. So get that book, Cold Times, with Dr. Anita Bailey. It was recommended by Ice Age Prepper before he got thrown off of YouTube. Yeah, finger splints and liquid stitches, absolutely. Bleed stop. I believe in the medical form of super glue as well. That's just, and that's what you're talking about, the liquid stitches. Fantastic piece of gear. Now, just something that I was told, and I'm not going to practice medicine or anything else. I was just taught when I was in EMT school before I started driving ambulances, was if the wound is deeper than it is long, you don't close it. You only close wounds that are longer than they are deep. Because if it's deep, you want it to heal from the inside out. So you kind of want to keep that exposed. Let's see, be right back. Got it. Yes, I just thought that was super, and I'm guilty. I did not do that. Yeah, I have basically an EMT bag in my pickup, and I have an EMT bag in here. And I have a different first aid kit on my bug out bag. I have a different first aid kit for my wife. I have a different first aid kit in her car. I need to standardize all that. That was such great advice last night. I'll look. We haven't been able to find any. We found all kinds of oral type 2, but we have not found any insulin related, because remember, type 1, there is no insulin being produced in the body, and in type 2, you just need to encourage it with some oral medications. So, but we are unaware of any oral medications for type 1s. So if you do, please message me and let me know, because we have not been able to find any of those. That was this one here. Want to encourage you to get your antibiotics now. Get that Jace Medical Kit if you can afford it. I think it's $250, but it's 4 major types of antibiotics that are necessary. Then make sure you get plenty of topical antibiotics as well. Then each community, they had this meeting, and all the sheriffs came in because they were trying to be forced into this new state, the new Kansas. And so it talks about each community determines its own form of governance. I have a link here, and this is one of my favorite videos on YouTube. It's a very 10-minute explanation, and they say, forget about left and right, because basically what it is the amount of governmental control. There's either anarchy, no government, or there's a totalitarian type of a government and with total control. And oligarchy, which is kind of, you have monarchy, then you have oligarchy, which is basically what the Senate was in Rome. Then in the middle, you have a republic. And then as you're moving down towards lack of control, you have democracy, which is basically mob rule. And then you have anarchy down at the other end. So it does a very good explanation of the 5 forms of government and how most people who want either an oligarchy or a monarchy use the chaos of anarchy in order to do away with the old form of government in order to implement their own new type of government. So really interesting discussion on that. I'll put it down in the show notes below. I encourage you to go see that. That is a fantastic 10-minute video. Okay. Then they kind of have this barter system now. So the sheriffs are all talking, and at this time, what they've done is they've taken the old and appeal to heaven. So it's on the cover of the book. So they took the old appeal to heaven flag and they put the community's name, Stonemont, at the bottom of it. So all the other sheriffs wanted to have that, feeling of collaboration. They wanted to have the appeal to heaven flag made for them as well, and then have their community name down below. So the tailor was willing to do those flags for them. And what they decided was they would barter and give her a cow for each flag. Well, that brings up another discussion that's in the book that I really, really admired. And that was, they said, well, what in the world is a tailor going to do with the cow? He said, not my business. If that's what she wants in order to make the flag, then I'm willing to pay it. We have plenty and she has plenty. So that takes us back to another one of those quotes that Dr. What's her name? Dr. Anita Bailey said in Cold Times. And she said, what is the true value of something? Whatever somebody's willing to give for it. That's what the value is. And so in this case, the value of a flag is a cow. Well, that type of a barter only works when you're in a society or in a collection of people where now you have a market to get rid of that cow for what you really want. And so now what we have is a market being established where she knows somebody who would like to have either the cow or the milk or the meat from that cow. And so they're willing to give something that she wants in exchange for the cow. So that's kind of how the barter system is going to work. You may not get what you want at first, but you may know somebody who wants what this guy has, and he's willing to give it to you for what you have. Now you take that and give it to the other person for what they have, because that's what you wanted in the first place. And, so it's going to be the barter system is going to be a very complex system in a post-SHTF world. So Mike and Tracy are getting married. We have, Alex and Aaron are going, and Dalton are going to do the same trip. They went down, they took the video recordings, they took the pictures, they took the letters and everything else down to Naomi's parents in Lubbock. Now they're going to do the same thing for Mike's parents, who are in Abbeville, South Carolina. And so now they've done that trip down to the Southwest. Now they're going east, and they're going to go across the Ozarks. That's where I was over the weekend. Let me tell you something. That's some of the scariest driving I've ever been in my life. In Germany, driving through the Alps, they do a better job of shoulders and guards, road guards, on the side of the road than what I experienced for 200 miles going through the Ozarks. I mean, no shoulder. You see grass. It's a 150-foot drop off. You fall into the trees. So, but they're going to go through the Ozarks. Going to make friends there. They're going to make. As a matter of fact, it's even mentioned at Viking Preparedness, Pastor Joe Fox, and talk about him a little bit there. He's in the Ozarks, and so then from there they go through the Vikings, which is Pastor Joe Fox and his crew, and because his channel is Viking Preparedness, and then they're going to go on into Abbeville. So then they get into the discussion. They found this old minister, Cassius Street. From the way they're talking about him, I think Cassius is a Vietnam War veteran, and so he has left. He was a pastor of a megachurch. I think that they said that it was like 20,000 member church, and he was one of 3 co-pastors. They had 6 services of 3,000 people each, and da-da-dee-da. And so, he said, no, that's not me. And he left. And so from the sounds of it, he was a chaplain in Vietnam, and he has some experience handling the emotional stuff that happens with in wartime and stress. And that can be very bad. We're still losing 22 vets a day to suicide because of what they've seen, what they've done. I was involved with a group for a while. We did counseling for veterans, and it's quite a thing when you pull the trigger and end somebody else's life, whether it's in war or anything else. It does a job on you. And so Jim Wyatt is asking Cassius if he'll not only serve the community by feeding them the Word of God, but if they'll also serve as basically a spiritual leader who is capable of, especially focusing on the scouts and the stuff that they're seeing, of helping them emotionally resolve the issues of what they've seen and how they've interacted with everybody else. And so his very first service that he does for the community, and everybody looks forward to it, is he has a little box that he carries up on the side of the mountain to have his first, or the hill, to do his very first service. And, he does his service basically from the box on the side of the hill. And my first thoughts were, when I think, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him for the transfiguration. He also, there were 3 of the prominent figures in the feeding, and there were 2 feedings. There was a feeding of the 4,000 and the feeding of the 5,000. Then, of course, the Garden of Gethsemane was on the Mount of Olives. And, so all these key things, all these key events that happened on mountains. And that all goes back to why, remember, the Sanhedrin was thinking that Jesus thought he was a prophet like Elijah. And during the transfiguration, who are the people who are with Jesus? Elijah and Moses. And so, Moses, mountain, 10 Commandments, Elijah, the mountain, just everything happens on mountains. And so I think Steve does a very good job of capturing all that biblical history by having Cassius give his first sermon or his first service on the side of the hill. Yes, Texas Red Leg is on here. He can tell you his experiences. I can tell you mine. I'm not combat arms. I was combat service support, but Texas Red Leg was combat arms, and he also had some combat support. But the stuff that happens in First and Second Maccabees during the Maccabean Revolt, which is where I was going when I was talking about the Purim and the freedom after the Persian King Ahasuerus and Esther. So in First and Second Maccabees during the Maccabean Revolt, what they had to do was, these people realized the importance of the mind and the body. So after a battle, all of the warriors had to purify and sanctify themselves for a full week. They could not be around other people. They had to pray. They had to wash. They had to spiritually wash and physically wash their bodies before they would be allowed to have contact again with the community. And and I imagine even back then it was more hand to hand and more in your face than what we have today. We have a little bit of a standoff, but still, it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. I think that anybody who takes another life is either insane at the time that they do it, or if they do it insanity during a war, become insane as a result of it. It's that mind-boggling for almost everyone. Yeah, and then of course you also have time. So as time goes, you become less and less responsive to it, and you have to get into a regimen where they're constantly changing the different medications that they give you. Okay, so we're down. Alex and Aaron and Brandon. God, the three of them, they just um, they're becoming the super scouts. I have a feeling that in book 5, as Mike becomes more of a master trainer, think of him as a general. The higher you get in the rank structure, the less direct contact you have with training and actual development. You're going to be more of a macro manager than a micro manager. And so I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more of Alex, Aaron, and Brandon in book 5, and they're going to be assuming kind of the position that Mike is in now as this continues to evolve and grow. And then, so now the next one is really cool. I brought mine out. This is my boot knife. So it's not a very big one. It's got a nice little clip on the back where it fits right down inside your boot. And it talks about how mine, unfortunately, has a Kydex sheath. So you really have to tug on it to get it out. And half the time when I try to get out of my boot, the whole thing comes out and I don't get just the knife. But it does have a little hole here. And that's what they're talking about with Reagan and her boot knife, is she's got it tucked down inside her boot. She has a little piece of string or rope or probably 550 cord coming out of the handle over the loop of her boot, and that way when she pulls on the cord, it pulls the knife out. And that's really interesting. What I find really, really interesting is that they go to all this problem, all this effort, or Steve does, of developing the boot knife, and that it's never used so far. Maybe next book, but it's not used in this book. So that I thought that was kind of an interesting development, that he would establish that here. But remember, when she does Johnny, she does it with a kitchen knife that she gets out of the kitchen. So now we talked about in the book, they continue to expand their circles of influence and their of interest, their spheres of influence. They're establishing acquaintances and comms lines. Remember that they're doing that mail run once a week amongst all the county sheriffs that are in this coalition that they're talking about. And so let me see. And one of the things that I've talked with Sergeant, Tom Sargent, and I forget the name of his channel. But anyhow, he and I have talked. I'm going to be interviewing him. And because of this series of books, because if you take a look at what happened to Reagan, to Bryn, to a couple other of the females that have been abused like you would not believe. Uh, One of the things that I'm concerned about, and something I'm not trained in, is how are we going? Those are going to happen in an SHTF situation. Those events will happen. What can we, as non-professional people, do to alleviate some of the pain and mental anguish that people are going to experience? So I'm going to be having him on as a live interview here at some point in the near future, and we're going to be discussing what can we do. Because there's also going to be a lot of trauma about people being unable to accept the reality of what's going on around them. So we're going to have to become pseudo psychologists if we intend to help those who are going to be suffering, who are around us while we're on it, or while we're in this situation. If we survive that long. So now then, this was really interesting. Because we were taught this in school, in spy school, but Lieutenant Damer gets all of his Kansas Highway Patrol, and they go to the Capitol, and they got these two soldiers who really aren't soldiers. They're just, I think they're illegal aliens that they gave uniforms to and told them to stand guard. I don't think they even know how to use their weapons. But Damer walks up to him and just says, "What are your orders?" And well, we guard the door, and who do you let in? Well, nobody. He says, "Sir," so all of a sudden he gets very controlling, he gets very authoritative, and he's telling them, "You treat me with respect. You tell me what you're doing. So let me see your weapon." And the guy gives him his weapon. He says, "Do you have any others? We're going to search you." So all of a sudden he just takes an assertive, positive control. And then we were taught that if you act like you're supposed to be there, and you exercise authority and command, nobody's going to question you. And so that's pretty much true. You can get away with a lot of stuff if you can just, I'm going to say, bully your way through it. But you have to be very assured of what you're doing. One of the questions that I have, and yes, Lori, I think you're absolutely correct. And I don't know if you've received training in it. I know your background, a little bit about your background, but I don't have sufficient background in dealing with that. But although I would love to help as much as I can, I think people are still in a state of shock, and I think that there's going to be a little bit of adjustment coming. And then once they see what that adjustment is, then I think that's going to be the new stage of shock, and people are going to be have major problems. So, yeah, I think you're right. So here's an interesting question for you. Reagan basically gets raped by Johnny. She volunteers for the service to the governor and his group and everything else, because she knows how fragile Bryn is. And so they wanted Bryn, but Reagan says she'll do it instead of Bryn. And of course, Reagan is considered to be a little bit more sexual than Bryn, because she's also has some of those features that the guys have a tendency to go after more so than Bryn does. And so she volunteers to go and in Bryn's place. And so she basically, it doesn't say it, but she does have ligatures on her arms from where she was tied up the night before. And so she wakes up, and of course the arms are sore, and her feet and everything else where she was tied up and abused. And she's looking at Johnny, and she decides to get dressed and just leave. So because she didn't want to make any noise and alert the guards. And so she leaves, she goes through the house, and she finds out that there's nobody else in the house. So she changes her mind. Now, remember, she has her boot knife, and she doesn't use it. Instead, she uses a kitchen knife. So she goes into the kitchen, grabs a butcher knife out of the kitchen, goes back upstairs. Before she goes into the room, she takes her clothes off. Why? Just a real quick question for you. Why does she take her clothes off before she goes back in to kill Johnny? My theory is she knew it was going to be bloody and she didn't want to get her clothes soiled. She, in case she was captured, there's plausible deniability. So there's plausible deniability if she doesn't have any blood stains on her clothing and she washes her body before she leaves. And whereas if she had her clothes on and blood splatter all over her clothes and everything else, there's no way she can deny it. So I think that, yeah, LG, you're right, that she did not want to be noticed. And I think that's part of the intricacies of these fantastic books is, these well thought out things that happen before things go. Oh, thank you. Steve's here with us. So Steve, my question is, you did all that fantastic development, and I showed them my boot knife. You did all that fantastic development back in the first third of the book about Reagan's boot knife and how she could get it out quickly and everything else. And then when she kills Johnny, she does it with a butcher knife. So is that so that they would think that was somebody who was unprepared or something and used what was at hand, and rather than somebody who was prepared and came in intentionally, which is what I perceive is that she was thinking she wanted to use something that would not betray her individually. But yeah, so yeah, I think she took off her clothes so that there was plausible deniability, no blood stain, no blood splatter on her clothes or anything else. And take care, Susan. We're going to miss you. Okay, and there's only one or two more slides here. So let's take a look at what's going on. This is developing extremely well. So we've got the New Kansas and Topeka, just north of this area. Okay, we've got the this alliance, if you will. I think of it as a mini NATO, because Stonemont are the big kids on the block. They've got the big forces and everything else, and we see that develop as what's his name, Stark, and starts with a C. When they, after Johnny's killed, they're going to go west and take out a town in retaliation for it. And of course, Reagan, Bren, and the other scouts have made it back to Stonemont. They wake Jim Wyatt up in the middle of the evening to tell him the information. They're going to go attack the city, so that they're able to establish an ambush. And they do away with him. Everybody but one. Everybody except for that one guy. His name starts with a C. We've got that. So we've got this kind of a gang mobster. I'm going to call them serendipitous mobs. People who are just out there who get other people together to do evil things together to try to take advantage of the situation. Then you've got the political mobs, like this New Kansas deal that's happening in the state. Then Steve has woven in two more facets of this. And you've got the Muslims up north who are coming down and trying to expand their control down into going towards Iowa. And then you've got what I call the banditos, or the Mexican cartels, who are coming up. And from the sounds of it, they've already got a portion of Texas pushing up towards the Lubbock area. Where Naomi's parents are and everything else. So we've got this whole coalition of bad events just totally surrounding this. Now, think of Europe in the Middle Ages. Okay, think of the Huns coming in from the east. Think of the challenges that were coming in from the Visigoths down in the south, and from the Franks in the west. And then you've got the Vikings, the Northmen, coming down and landing in Normandy. And so you've got all these challenges coming on. And what do you have? You have all these fiefdoms. You have these castles, these independent baronets, or if you want to call them kingdoms, you can. But you've got this one guy in charge of a castle, and really all they control is that area right around that area that they can actively defend. And that's what's being established here as we take a look historically at what's happening in central Kansas, as we see the same thing happening in the Ozarks as they're going through there. We see the same thing happening in South Carolina and some of the other things as they're going over towards Abbeville. So we've got these little, I don't know what we're going to call them. I don't want to call them a fiefdom, but we can call them city-states. All these great little city-states that are being formed and are independently are incapable of meeting the greater threat. So they can't do it independently. They're going to have some sort of coalition. But at the same time, if you remember back at the beginning when Jim and Bill are talking about the definition of citizenship, when they talk about the definition of a city-state, they don't want to be part of the new Kansas. So how do you defend against these bigger entities that are coming in and invading when you're an independent city-state? So that's going to be interesting how that develops in the next two books. And I'd like to see how that's going to be happening. So then, of course, we have the ambush of the bad guys as they're approaching, going west out of the zoo in Topeka, and that kind of ends book number 4. So I'm really looking forward to book number 5. And we'll have that down below. One of the things, please do me a favor, because I think this is going to be really important for you to understand the discussion that's going on between Jim and Bill, and later Christian, as Christian's being developed to take Jim's place. And I think Mike's going to probably have more of a strategic role in this group as well, as it continues to develop. But do me a favor. I'm going to put that link down below in the show notes. So come back tomorrow, and no, Steve is in the process right now, GGG, of doing the audiobooks, and as a matter of fact, he did a video on making the audiobooks and kind of how demanding that is, because if you make a mistake, you got to go back and edit. And I did a 75th anniversary of a electric co-op. I did all the announcing on it for the history of it and everything else before I had my throat surgery and ruined my voice. But so that was a 15-minute historical thing. And we had to do it so many times. It was pitiful. I can't imagine how, and Steve is going to get this word for word exactly correct, an entire book with intonation and everything else. More power to him, because just a 15-minute presentation for me would prove to be extremely difficult. So I envy him for he is working on that. The audiobooks will be out at some point in the near future. So that's kind of where we are. Gosh, character development has been just superior. And some of the smaller stuff that you don't catch, and like Cassius going up on the side of the hill for that first church service, and then the discussion between Jim Wyatt, and of course Christian took him in to talk to Jim, but when he said, "I'm ready to become what you need me to be," and Jim having the forethought of saying, I need somebody not only to be the religious leader, but I need somebody to take care of the mental stress that my scouts are going to be going through. So there's a lot of fantastic character development that's going on. I think the reality of the for example, the barter of a cow for a flag, and not caring what she wants it for or why or anything else, that's going to be the barter system, because now she's going to have a cow and she can get what she really wants for that cow somewhere else. So I think the development is just fantastic. Anybody have any other ideas or questions or? Tracy, I have two fears because I think both of them are run by people who are incapable of decent human thought. Xi Jinping does not scare me as much. I mean, he can do some stupid things. I mean, he can do some, start a war and all that kind of stuff. But I think he's more of a rational person. I think that Vladimir Putin is a rational person, and but when I start thinking about the Ayatollah and the Iranian government, when I start thinking about the North Korean government, those people are not rational. And I think that had the election gone a different way, we would not be in the position we are now, because they knew that he would be willing to do what is necessary to protect the allies. And so I think that Kim Jong-il is at the point now where he knows nobody's going to do anything to counter him, and so he is going to exert his pressure, exert his authority, scare us as much as possible. And I would say that both Iran, even though they've got what appears to be a small revolution going on there, and North Korea are my two biggest fears. I think those two can so easily get out of kilter; it's pitiful, and more so than Vladimir Putin. And I want to show you something. Let's see if I can get something to do this and show it to you. Let me see. Here we go. I'll use one of my bookmarks, but in Russian. Okay, in Russian, his name is Vladimir, so that's VLAD. Okay, now if you change the V to a B, so BL, and then instead of an A, you have a Ya. So now instead of Vlad, you have Blyad. So that's BLYAD. Blyad. That's a prostitute. So just change 2 letters in Vlad's name, and you go from Vladimir to prostitute. So I thought that was kind of neat. But anyhow, anything else anybody has? I'm looking forward to book 5. We'll do that the last Thursday of this month. I hope everybody can catch up on it. I'll put the link to that book down below as well. Please, Integrative Preparedness is the name of the channel here on YouTube. If you go there, down in his comments down below that are the instructions on how you can get autographed copies of all 5 of his current books. So if you just want 1 or 2 of them, you can still go there, follow those links. He will autograph the books for you, and he'll send them out to you. He just got in a whole bunch of books that he's autographing now to get out. So I would encourage you to do that. So let me catch up on the chat here and see where we are. And we probably are going to call it a night. What were you laughing at, Steve? Okay, we did that one. Yes, I do like A American, however. I did think that he did a good series of books. I also liked Forsyth. He did a good series of books. I did not like as much. He's the EMP doctor for NASA. He did a series of books, the Coming Home series, but it had these mutants and I don't like those kinds of figures. I like this. This is my thing right here. I love these books. Yes. Go to Amazon and give his books a great review. And we will do the book 5 review at the end of this month. And then we'll have to wait a couple months until he gets out book 6, and we'll do that. So here's his, thank you, Lori. So here's his channel, and you can go there and take a look at any of his videos. And in the comment area down immediately below that, you'll see how you can get a hold of his books. Okay, thank you, both of you. Thank you very much. Any other questions before we call it a night? Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And I, he and I think I'm not 100% sure. Um, Helen and I did our first vacation um, since 2000. We went to Branson, Missouri this last weekend, and while we were there, Steve put out a video about how to make sorghum that he did at Silver Dollar City, which is just 5 miles away from Branson. And so I have a feeling we just barely missed each other. He recommended I go there. We went to we were going to go to Silver Dollar City, but the day we went is Monday. They're closed Mondays and Tuesdays, and so we were going to go on Monday, and we didn't make it. The only thing we got to do was to see a Motown show, which took me back to high school like you would not believe. Okay. Uh, GGG, I could grab my everyday carry over here. I am probably the only guy you're going to meet. Remember that I got into this because of the November 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. I am the only person you're going to find who carries a Geiger counter in his everyday carry bag. And so I've had one. I want to get some more dosimeters. I want to make sure that there are dosimeters for every person in my family, and I'm going to be ordering those very quickly. But I do have a Geiger counter. What I probably should do if I were a smart human being is take it out of my everyday carry bag and put it into a Faraday bag. Because if there's an EMP associated with a high altitude burst, then my Geiger counter is not going to do me any good if it's fried because of an EMP. So I probably need to get that out of my everyday carry bag and into a Faraday bag, and that would be the smart thing to do. But nobody's ever called me smart. So yeah, I wish I could go. We were talking about that. We're probably going to have to do that sometime here soon. Yes, mine is. Let me get mine here. Just a second. So this is my everyday carry bag. I usually like to have grocery shopping bags. And so here is my Geiger counter. This is by GQ Electronics. And I did get this on Amazon because I had the old big bulky one, but I'd have to have it calibrated now. And but I'll tell you what, there is a guy here about an hour south of me who bought up all the old civil defense Geiger counters, dosimeters, and everything else. He sells them relatively cheaply, less than $100, calibrated and everything else. I'll put his link in the show notes when we get done with this as well. And so you can get that. This one, I think I paid, gosh, I got this. You were still in the old house. So it had to be about 8 years ago. And I think I paid about $75 for it 8 years ago. So it's GQ Electronics on Amazon. I'll put a link for that in the notes as well. Okay, anything else? Okay, then remember, let's go to Numbers. Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 on, 24, 25, and 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and grant you peace. Remember, we're all in this together, so we can come out the other side together. Be nice, kind, and polite, respectful with each other, because togetherness is the key. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening, and please stay safe. Bye-bye.